Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Of course, let's begin the show with news that the Dewan Rakyat Speaker Tan Sri Muhammad Arif Yusof has accepted Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad's motion of no confidence in Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin's leadership. However, Muhammad Arif's statement did not specify when the motion will be tabled. Joining us on the line now to help put this all into context, we have Ibrahim Sufian, better known as Ben, Program Director at Merdeka Centre. Welcome to the show, Ben. What do you think are the political ramifications of the Speaker's decision to allow for the motion of no confidence?
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for having me on. I think this is in many ways unprecedented. To have the Speaker grant a motion of no confidence against the sitting Prime Minister. And in part, it's reflective of the situation where the Speaker is a holdover from the previous Pakatan Harapan administration, and he has allowed the motion of no confidence against the PM. I think the immediate impact is, I think, the estimation of whether or not the Prime Minister can survive the vote. And I think a deeper question would be, how will the two coalitions react to this motion? Because as we understand, on one side, Pakatan Harapan is not completely in sync with Tun Dr Mahathir, who has put this motion across. So there is, I think, a lot of question as to whether Pakatan Harapan is going to join forces with Dr Mahathir and Parti Warisan Sabah in order to make up the numbers on the day itself.
Ben, can I interject here for a second? Apparently, you know, in 2015, Sri Wan Aziza put up a no confidence motion. It seems in the past there have been instances, but they were never debated. There were reasons why that motion never made it to the House for debate. And there's expectations that, in fact, this time things might not, in fact, pan out for this particular motion. Do you factor that in as a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, I do factor that one in. But I think first and foremost is that we do have a situation where the sitting administration, enjoys only a very slim majority at best. And there's also question mark as to whether it really does have a majority. So I think this test in Parliament, if it comes to this extent, will actually show whether or not the Prime Minister really enjoys majority. Now, the other part that I wanted to add in is the stance of his coalition partners, whether do they really support him in all genuineness, because there are also, I think, some view that there are parties in his coalition, in Perikatan Nasional, that might favour snap polls being called. That is, of course, if the motion of no confidence sees the light of day, in the sense that the Speaker allows it to take precedence on May 18th. But if it doesn't, one can still see it come about again in the next parliamentary sitting, which people say will be in July.
Okay. All right, Ben. So if the motion is debated, we don't know when yet, but if it is debated, then what do you see as the consequences of its success or failure?
Well, I think it's really touch and go, because we don't really know in all clarity the number of MPs that support the Prime Minister. Because when the Prime Minister gained, or rather got the support to form administration, he claimed he had the support of majority, counting the numbers he had in his party, as well as UMNO and PAS and other parties. But I think as things have panned out, they are not all of the MPs in Bersatu are with him. So there are some question marks as to whether or not he really does command support. I think that arithmetic is something that I think people want to put to rest, and therefore then have confidence that he can continue to manage government.
So Ben, as a pollster, I don't want to, sorry to interject again, but as a pollster, do you have a sense of the public mood? I mean, especially are people open to the idea of more political competition in terms of a parliamentary game? Is that where the country is at this point in time?
I mean, we've done some polling, right around late March, early April, where we looked at, how the public viewed the government, and we did this on the back of some of the polling. But at that point in time, it does appear that the public doesn't really have stomach for politicking, because a lot of people are basically consumed with the COVID-19 virus, the impact of the lockdown. And I think people now, at this point in time, are getting increasingly concerned about the condition of the economy and how it's going to impact their livelihoods. So I think the people, at this point in time, does want government to stay focused on fixing the economy and getting Malaysia back to work. And so calling for a motion of no confidence within 2 weeks' time might be, I think, a bit premature and might put off some people who feel that this is too much politics at a time when the country is facing a grave crisis.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us, Ben, tonight. We appreciate your time. Now, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay tuned to Consider This. Hello, if you've just joined us, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, with me, Sharad Kutan. Joining us on the show tonight, we have YB Charles Santiago, DAP Member of Parliament for Klang. Charles, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Now, before we get into the COVID situation on the ground in Klang, I'd like to get your thoughts on the news today that Dr Mahathir's motion of no confidence against Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin has been approved by the Dewan Rakyat Speaker. What do you make of that, Charles?
Well, definitely this is a very interesting development, I must say. But I think it's good. I think it's good, and I think we should challenge the Prime Minister on whether he has enough support on his side. So I think it will be a very challenging May 18th in Parliament. But I also think that they will make every effort not to allow the no confidence vote to happen. So I'm sure they will work out every possible strategy in the book to throw a spanner at every point in order to make sure that the no confidence vote does not happen.
Charles, I do want to ask you, though, in terms of the kind of debate around politics in the country at the time of COVID-19, some people will say that this is kind of tone deaf as a move, that, that the country needs less politics, not more politics. What's your position on that?
Well, I think politics cannot be divorced from the reality of the country. And at this time, I think a government that is elected by the people should be the one that is providing leadership to the way forward in terms of either it's post-COVID or even trying to manage the economy. Right. As you can see, the new government that we have, or the as popularly called the backdoor government that we have, essentially is not cohesive. It's not cohesive. It's all torn into various groups. And in fact, even the state governments have no respect for them. 7 of the state governments, they refuse to follow the recommendations in opening the respective state economies and so on. So clearly, you can see that the support for this government is dwindling and dwindling very fast.
Okay, well, Charles, a couple of weeks ago, you were summoned for questioning over your alleged violation of the MCO while distributing provisions to your constituents. Now, can you tell us, Charles, how Klang residents have been dealing with not just the MCO, but also the pandemic? What's the view from the ground?
A couple of weeks ago, we were in the red zone. Klang was in the red zone. We had 180 infections in Klang. But today it's dropped to 14. So I think as a result of social distancing, MCO and so on, it was able to stop the spread. However, I think I've been on the ground for the last 45 days, almost on every other day, trying to provide food support, trying to provide groceries to people, and this far, sometimes even milk powder for children. In fact, I think this far we have provided something like support to 14,000 houses, families, I must say, though, 14,000 families so far in Klang. And the number is increasing at a rapid rate. The number of people who are losing jobs, the number of people who have not received their salary in the last 2 months, and a lot of jittery people because they are scared that when they go back to work, possibly next week. They might get a pay cut. They may be asked to take a pay cut. And what is worse, they might lose their jobs. So a lot of anxiety on the ground. That's one. And at the same time, people do not have the funds. I mean, studies have clearly shown that the saving rate of Malaysians are very poor, especially in the B40. And a B40 person saves something like 85 ringgit a month. And therefore, clearly, those families will be challenged. And we have a big number of B40 in Klang, especially those who are living in low-cost houses and so on and so forth.
Charles, can I ask you, though, to what extent have the packages that have been rolled out, the schemes that have been rolled out by the current government, have they helped your constituents? Have they been able to access those aid packages or job retention schemes, any of those sorts?
Yes, I think it has helped some people, especially those who are engaged in the formal sector, The people who have now completely gone through, completely left out of the support of the government is the informal sector. And the informal sector involves something like 5.6 million Malaysians, 5.6 million people working in the informal sector, which is about, slightly 39 to 40% of the total workforce in the country. So you have at least 4 out of 10 people who are in the informal sector who will not be able to have get access or have access to the support that the government is providing.
And how do you propose to capturing this informal sector? I mean, do we actually, you quoted some numbers there, but to what extent, even if the government had the political will, how would it reach out to these people in the informal sector?
Well, I think this is where they have to activate different parts of the different layers of government in order to reach out to different people. And my experience with the Jabatan Kebajikan Masyarakat is that they are in no position to reach out to these people, partly because they don't have the resources, and also they don't have the people to do it. And therefore, this is where non-governmental organizations need to come in order to help the government, in order to reach out to people who have been left out of who have just gone through the crack, into the crack, and unable to access government support.
Okay.
But I also must say that lots of religious organizations, non-governmental organizations have come out, NGOs have come out in order to support people who have just gone through the crack and unable to get access to the support the government is providing. But having said that, I also must point out that we have a new category of people who are now joining the unemployment ranks. And these are young people, and people who have just got married. And I met a couple of them recently, and I saw some numbers which actually shows that the number of people in the categories from the age of 20 to 30, this is the largest group that has been laid off. And a young woman came to me the other day and apologized to me. We were distributing vegetables in Bandar Baru Klang. And she came out to me and said, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be joining this line, but I have no choice because my husband lost his job, and therefore we have no choice but to join this line." I said, please, this food is for everybody.
Right.
Yeah, please take it. So you can see even the middle class is affected by the MCO and affected by or unable to access government support.
Okay.
So I think the government has to really rethink the packages and start putting another package urgently, because the 1,600 they had given would have completely finished by now. So then,
Charles, I completely hear you that the M40 is hurting as well. I just want to get a very quick response from you to find out what the perspective has been on foreign workers, especially in Klang. Are they the ones also falling through the cracks?
Well, Malaysian workers as well as migrant workers both face almost similar problems. I've met migrant workers who have not been paid for 2 months, who don't have a job to go back to. And if they don't have a job to go back to, it technically means they become undocumented, because you need to work for somebody. You need to work for somebody in order for you to be documented. As soon as you don't have a job with a particular company or a particular employer, then you don't have a job. That means technically you have to leave the country. Now, there are lots and lots of migrant workers who are just stranded at this time. I mean, really stranded. And in the course of our distribution of food, which we give to migrant workers as well, this is a challenge that they are telling us. They say, we don't know what to do. We don't know who to go to. So that is why the government's approach towards migrant workers has to change. It cannot be one based on fear. It has to be one that is based on cooperation and understanding that you need them in order to solve this problem of COVID, including COVID testing and so on and so forth. But at the same time, find an avenue for them to work, provide amnesty if they have to, or send them back to the respective countries. I think these options has to be thought through by the government.
All right. Charles, we're going to get you to stay on the line. We're going to take a quick break, but first we're going to continue this conversation in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to consider this. Thank you for staying with Sharad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our conversation with YB Charles Santiago, MP for Klang. And up to about a month ago, he was also the chairman of the National Water Services Commission, or better known as SPAN. Charles, after the change in government, was the termination letter expected?
To be fair, I think it was expected. And I was also ready to hand it over, or to write in and say, okay, my term is over. But the letter came, and it came at a very wrong time for SPAN. And also, I think it also kind of scuttled a whole variety of reforms that we were trying to put forward. So
Charles, could you elaborate on precisely those reforms then? Tell us a little more about what is it that you were trying to do, what you thought was necessary to do for water management in this country?
The first thing that we did actually was to put forward an integrated plan. An integrated plan that will cover not only the SPAN itself, but cover all water and sewage providers from Malaysia. So this means that integrity will become a priority for all water providers, and they have to be transparent at every point in the contract and whatever procurement that they are involved in. And they also have to spend something like 1% of the operating expenditure in order to ensure that integrity is, ideas of integrity or notions of integrity are discussed and shared within the workforce. So at the end of the year, the entire workforce will have gone through some kind of a training and capacity building on integrity issues.
Charles, was this simply a question of wanting these higher values in the organizations, or did you see a deficit in terms of actual practices, or seeing corruption or mismanagement or any other kind of problems in which integrity was going to be the solution?
In fact, when I took over the organization, I met at least about 80 different stakeholders from a variety of organizations, academia, NGOs, and so on and so forth. And one of the important issues that was raised with me was the issue of integrity and corruption in the industry. So based on my own reading of the situation and talking to a variety of people, we got the help of NGOs as well as SPRM, who were helpful, and also the Transparency International as well, who helped us. So we had C4, Transparency International, we had SPRM themselves, as long as our own internal staff, the SPAN staff, who put together the entire plan, and it was pushed through by the Commission. The Commission endorsed it, and we have already started to get our operators in all the states to begin to embrace and begin to support the process this year. Actually, it's supposed to have been rolled out this year.
Right. Charles, do you think... Can I just get your thoughts on whether you think this COVID-19 crisis will actually diminish environmental concerns and concerns of reform of environmental institutions?
I think, there is a tendency for that to happen because everybody's talking about COVID and health as a priority, and it should be a priority. Health should be a priority. But I also think environment should be thought through very carefully, and also as the priority of the nation. Because the environment, you need to protect the environment. And it is something that you don't postpone for another day. You do it on the spot. And I think at this time, we already have a problem with our environment, especially our rivers. Our rivers are very polluted, are highly polluted. We have what you call pharmaceutical pollution in the rivers. We have plastic pollution. We have chemical pollution. We have electronic waste pollution in the rivers, as well as and sewage pollution as well in our rivers. So our rivers are very, 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 very contaminated.
And quickly, Charles, are there sufficient laws to protect our rivers and our water catchment areas?
Catchment areas, one, we have what we call it, we can, what do you call it, the nice word for it, but it's not coming to my head right now. You can, catchment areas need to be completely cut away from development.
Okay, well, what about rivers then? Are there sufficient laws to protect rivers?
I was trying to put forward the idea there was a need for national river protection authorities, which is a standalone idea where you protect the river. And rivers should be considered as national security. This is something that you have to do. You look at Selangor, for example, we had a problem with seepage of chemicals into the treatment plant in September of last year, and it happened again in December of last year, and a few weeks ago it happened again. So this is going to repeat itself, and people are going to keep on polluting the river, and this is going to impact on the water that we drink, and the river itself. So therefore, my view is that once you create you make water, especially rivers, as part of security, national security, then you will protect it. And therefore, the suggestion that is being put forward is you create space on both sides of the river, and you cannot have any development on both sides of that river. Okay. This is something that has to be done, and will be monitored by the police, by auxiliary police if necessary. And different parts of the country. Maybe you can't do it for the entire country, but on very critical points, we can still do it.
Charles, thank you so much for speaking with us. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have on tonight's edition of Consider This. We appreciate your time and your insights. I'm Melissa Idris with me, Sharad Kutan, signing off for this evening. Thank you so much and have a great weekend. Thank you for watching and good night.